The following episode contains or may contain spoilers. So if you're spoiler sensitive, maybe beware.
Yeah, you sensitive people.
Get out.
Oh, get in.
The audience should know.
Probably not.
Kayla is sharpening a knife right now. She's doing it, and you're just fine with it. Oh, that's fine.
Yeah, it's because it's probably going to be aimed at you.
Why do you have blood on your
He's
smock?
on my
Why
side.
are you covered in blood?
He's on my side. Welcome to the Fantom Zone.
Were you trying to be me?
Yes.
That he does sound like a British guy from the 40s who has half trumpet. That is, I've always said that but,
I
about
don't
you.
sound like that.
Sure you do.
Welcome to the Fantom Zone.
Okay, with that, welcome to the Fantom Zone. 3 fans, 1 podcast, and a sea of comics. You can't be me.
I'm trying. I can't do it. You're right.
I'm working on that.
Oh,
You know,
no, it's
those
like
times?
the foghorn.
Yes.
I got it.
Yep.
So, anyway, this episode.
Oh, don't say what it is yet.
Well,
Because I want to. We'll start with a
Are you
song.
gonna read me my
Let's do a
rights
song.
first?
Let's do a song.
He's stealing my
Bad boys, bad boys.
Oh.
What you gonna do? What you gonna do when they come for you? Nobody's gonna give you no chicken. I think
there's-
that's what he says.
there's more
Nobody's
words?
gonna give you more steak. I don't know, but it's yeah.
what? That's
Isn't
not
that what
the
he says?
words.
Nobody's gonna give you no chicken.
I'm pretty-
Nobody's gonna give
I
you no
only know
steak.
those first, 2 lines.
Yeah, I think that's everybody.
Yeah.
Anyway, this song is about, or this song, this episode is about reggae. And
All right, so Jered can stop talking.
Okay, I'll stop.
This episode is about law enforcement, cops, the boys in blue.
Not always.
Yeah, in comics. Yeah, not always in blue.
Yeah, sometimes in green, like in Wisconsin. I think they have, unless I'm wrong. Listeners from Wisconsin, tell us if your police dress in green.
Are you being
Thank
serious?
you. I think they do. I think
Are you just thinking
I used
of
to watch
Fargo?
No, I might be. First of all, I might be. But I used to watch Cops a lot in the 90s. Which is why
You could always tell when it was
well,
from
they
Wisconsin.
would show, but it's the cops from everywhere, and sometimes it would be like, oh, these people are in like purple. This is weird. This is an illegitimate law enforcement. Yeah, their
Well-
arrests shouldn't count.
And the reason we're doing cops in comics
Yes,
is because they're not the main characters, but they're still usually
that's true.
on the side of good, even if they're
Kind of.
working as antagonists to the hero.
Agreed.
So there's lots of different ones, different categories, different types.
What's interesting to me about this, because I think it seems almost like a bit random that we're doing like cops, but here's my theory that I would suggest is that cops like have kind of been there from the beginning in a sense, right? Because the very idea of like someone, like a hero, what do you call it, costume vigilante or something like that, they're directly related to the law, right? Because they're doing it in defiance of the law.
Yep.
And the law is the police, so
So they
they've
have
always-
to have a cop,
Absolutely, yeah,
or
yeah.
at least law enforcement there to be like, you can't do that.
Yeah, so even when cops aren't in like the story itself, they're like sort of directly implied.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of characters like Batman.
Yeah.
I mean, he did it because Gotham was not getting saved the way it should be.
That is really interesting that you bring that up.
This is actually just an
Yes.
excuse to talk about Jim Gordon.
Yes, it really is. And we're probably going to put a lot of time into the old commish Gordon. But the reason I say it's interesting you say that is because I think most of the time what we think is that cops are positively shown in the comic books because there are a lot of good characters.
You would
But-
think.
But I think that there's actually maybe a subtle indictment against police in comics, which is the very idea of somebody saying, I've got to dress up like a bat and fight crime is sort of saying, at least pointing in the direction that like normal law enforcement institutions are either too corrupt or too impotent to take on real crime. So I think there's something, it kind of goes both ways.
Yeah, well, I can't imagine just regular law enforcement being able to take down some of the supervillains that you
Hell
see
yeah.
on the pages. So,
Yeah.
No, not at all.
They can't fight Mr. Freeze.
no.
The handcuffs wouldn't fit around his his
You talked earlier
hands.
about muting his mic or turning it off.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we should start talking about some of the different types of cops. So like the supporting kind of C characters. They're not necessarily B characters, but...
How dare you insult Commissioner Gordon this way?
Well, I mean, I don't mean to. It's just he shines the light when he can't do what he needs.
He predates my boy Dick Grayson.
He does.
He came out in 1939. And sorry, I'm like obsessed with when characters like made their debut, but that was such a startling thing to know. And like you'd said, of course, from the beginning, there has to have been law enforcement because, again, the whole reason vigilante justice is, I don't know, controversial is because law enforcement is like, you can't do that.
Yeah.
So of course, from the beginning.
Yeah,
I mean,
well,
even
then they can just be like, well, then you do it. Oh, wait, you can't.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, even before we get to Batman and stuff like that, some of the earliest comic book kind of right on the line of superhero-dom are people like Dick Tracy or the Spirit. So they're sort of like characters that are just cops but bigger than life or something like that. Yeah, but I think Batman's the first one that comes out, and it's like
Especially with this crowd.
yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. But you got Batman, like I said, the Commissioner Gordon. At this point, don't we feel really bad for him?
Yes.
Is it Commissioner Gordon?
Why?
By having that proximity to the Bat,
he's gotten a lot of shit for it.
Oh my God, so much. You know what I'm talking about. No, I think, well, just let people guess. Email us if you know what he's been through. No, I mean, I'm just saying he's lost wives. His daughter's been paralyzed. He's been tortured by the Joker.
His son's a psychopath.
All the paperwork, Batman related paperwork.
That is true.
Well,
White Knight kind of goes into that a little bit too, like all the money and stuff he's destroyed in the city. I mean, who do you think's like taking all those reports?
Yeah.
And everything? Yeah. It's Commissioner Gordon. So to see Commissioner Gordon still support Batman in whatever storyline you're reading, sometimes he doesn't. I mean, he's a good friend. I mean, doing all that paperwork for him, being like, I know he destroyed this building and like maybe tore down this children's hospital, but he took down the Joker again.
There needs to be like a issue where it's just about his crippling carpal tunnel syndrome.
All the paperwork.
Yeah.
A day in the life in the office of Commissioner Gordon.
But it's cool. You know what I think's cool? I mean, I'm sure we all have different like Commissioner Gordon like things that we like. I think mine is like it kind of shows that, you know, it takes a village, not just a bat. In a sense, because like Batman does all the kind of heavy lifting and heavy batarang throwing and everything like that, but he kind of can't do it without this legitimate like partner in like if he beat the crap out of these dudes, somebody has to take them after they've been like bound and bat hogtied or whatever and put them somewhere.
They typically go through the legal way after Batman captures them. So.
Yeah, you don't really ever get to see that side. Sometimes you do, depending on what story it is. But I've always liked Commissioner Gordon only because, to me, it seems some of the stories you'll see him do the day in the life of Commissioner Gordon going after these people before Batman came around and stuff like that. And it's kind of like what Batman would have been if he went the legal route, I guess, on like stopping crime. Because I feel like he's very much like him because he's very disconnected from it. And he's very gritty and hard. Well,
and I'm going to bang this drum a lot in this episode, I think. But I honestly think part of it is his, and actually Nolan's movies really bring this out. He's really distrustful of Gotham PD. He really thinks Gotham PD, at least in the beginning, sucks a lot.
Well, he saw it firsthand.
Yeah. So I think a functioning police system would see a guy in a rubber suit, beating the crap out of people, basically half waterboarding mafiosos and stuff as maybe a bit of a problem. But because he's like, well, they're all in the take or dumb or whatever it is, he's like, yeah, I'm gonna let this go and I'm gonna put a flashlight.
I definitely think his common sense / intelligence is one of the better things about Gordon, because he can realize that he has his own morals. He still believes like you should follow the law, you should do it our way, but he's wise enough to realize that the Gotham PD is corrupt, that it's not unshakable, and that sometimes Batman is needed. But also, I know we talked about this in the supporting characters episode, but when he is on Batman's side, he is extremely loyal, because he gets a lot of heat for even just, they know that he's working with him sometimes, and people don't like that. That's not what he's supposed to be doing, but he's
Gordon
just extremely loyal.
He'd be kicked off the force in real life.
Right? He keeps putting that bat signal back up on top of PD.
Yeah.
Like they take it down and he's like, I got a new one.
I'm super fond of Commissioner Gordon, actually.
Yeah, he's great.
Yeah, but I think his history with Batman is pretty intertwined. He's had his daughter become Batgirl, then to
be paralyzed.
Be paralyzed by one of Batman's villains, and then to come back.
Kite Man, I believe.
It was not Kite
Okay,
Man.
it was not Kite Man.
But yeah, I mean, and he's still working with Batman. I mean, Batman has fucked his life up.
Yeah.
Just being in that close of proximity with him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But also, I mean, at this point, there's so many freakish supervillains running around Gotham City. Like, it's sort of after the Batman's been well established. It's amazing not everybody's on the Gordon train.
Yeah.
You know, it's like it's one thing if like early on before there's like the Joker and the Riddler and Two-Face and Clayface and all this other faces out there, you know, that they're like, well, I don't know about this rubber bat dude. But at the point where there are 40 or 50 people just in Arkham alone, you'd think every cop would just be like, yeah, we need Batman.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
more
I just
people aren't
think,
on his side.
yeah, I just think it's more of they still have to have that old mentality. There has to be some kind of conflict with the cops because then how is Batman a vigilante?
And also,
Yeah.
It's a good point because I almost forgot. Batman is doing things that are illegal.
Yeah.
I forgot about that. Yeah.
Like interrogating people
Yeah.
on tops of buildings.
It's the one thing that people always forget about Batman. And when people say like, "Oh, he doesn't kill," it's like, "Yeah, sure, he tortures people. Though. That's probably illegal. Probably can't punch people until they tell you things. You're not allowed to do that."
I'm just, whenever Jim Gordon is in danger, it's kind of almost, not quite, but almost in comparison to how I feel when Alfred is in danger sometimes when I'm reading or playing games when he's in trouble. I'm just like, no, don't hurt him.
Yeah.
There's this Telltale Batman game. I think it's the first one where
So good.
I love Telltale. Rest in peace. Wasn't totally planning on working there one day. There's this part where Batman's gathering information and he can either give the information to Vicky Vale and publish it publicly, or he can give the information to Gordon and try to do things the legal way. And the statistics after the episode, because they publish who made what choice, most people gave it to Vicky Vale, but I was like, no, I trust Gordon. I trust him. Turns out, right decision.
Yeah.
Nice.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah, spoiler alert. It's, give it to Jim if you haven't played it.
People would give it to Vicky Vale over Jim Gordon.
It's just the way the story's set up because you kind of start this relationship with Vicky Vale and that you give her something, she helps you out kind of thing.
Yeah, so like the game kind of is like, you should probably give it to Vicky. That probably is the right thing
but
to
it
do.
turns out Vicky Vale was Killer Croc the whole time.
Not quite.
No.
Now, okay,
But a
well,
villain.
I took a guess. I guess.
We tried to be spoiler free, but it just doesn't work.
That's why in the beginning we have a new, this is your spoilers.
That's right. But yeah, so Jim Gordon is also, you mentioned like he's just lovable and he's Alfred-like because he is like away from everything. He's like a nice old guy just, who has a daughter and cares about his family. Jim Gordon ends up being the kind of like archetype for the positive, supportive cop role.
Yeah.
And there's a bunch of Jim Gordon wannabes out there. Not that they're bad, just that clearly they were in the kind of like tradition of Jim Gordon.
Mm-hmm. Well, and we can't forget about Harvey Bullock.
Bullock, yeah.
So he's always, I've always hated him for some reason.
Yeah.
Like he's always that kind of cop that is such an asshole.
Oh, yeah.
Like he can't do good, but it's like, it's black and white with Jim and Bullock for sure. But
apparently, so I'm not a big Batman history buff, but somebody told me that Harvey Bullock used to be just straight up bad. Like they kind of he was a dirty cop. And then as the stories have kind of progressed, they've been like, oh, well, he's kind of illegal, but he's very loyal to Jim Gordon. And he's a fat man with a heart of gold. Something like that.
The weird thing, he'll launder money and do all these like drug deals with like lower level street kind of things.
Yeah.
But then when somebody needs help and he's on patrol with Jim, he'll help him out. So it's not necessarily that he's a dirty cop for sure.
Yeah, yeah.
But I mean, he's not like working with the Joker or anything like that.
I like him now. I'm gonna tell you right now. The show animated series the best Harvey Bullock ever. Just really dumb. Like, yeah, Batman, I hate him. Oh, yeah, that's perfect impression.
You just
Bits, whatever.
You just want excuses to do voices, don't you?
I want excuses to do them badly.
Congratulations.
But he's great, and I wanted to mention a few other people. So there's one character that really bothers me that she didn't stick around because the idea of her was really good, and it's Captain Jean Dewolff. And the reason it's really cool is that she was this attempt at way before, anything like a Marvel, the Avengers, or like what's Infinity War or something like that. She was supposed to be this character that was joining all of the Marvel heroes. So she's primarily in Spider-Man, but she would be a cop that also would appear like in the Avengers or in Daredevil or something like that. And they offed her. She was a really strong female character too.
She died?
Yeah, she was killed by the Sin Eater, which is a character you've never heard of because he sucked, and they just used it like as a cheap sort of like
emotional
moment.
ploy.
Yeah, and it was at the expense of this really, really cool character. So like I said, one very strong female character who was also showing that like, women in comics or supportives don't have to be like damsels. Yeah. She's very early in that respect, and it just kind of stinks that she got killed. But it's a cool idea too, which is that like, even in DC, because they're in these different cities, they're like everybody's got a different cop. Superman's got Maggie Sawyer, so you got that, and I think Dan Turpin is another sort of cop that's floating around or whatever. And then there's the Gotham PD, but it would have been cool to have like one cop because in Marvel it's all in Manhattan.
That's funny that you did bring up Maggie Sawyer because her kind of transition because she was in Metropolis.
Yeah.
But she's been in Gotham for quite a long time.
That's transferred.
Cool. Yeah, she transferred, and funny enough, so she divorces. She leaves her, I think it's her fiance maybe or something like that, and then she ends up in a relationship with Mrs. Kane, which is Batwoman.
Oh, look at that!
Yeah.
So, look at that little point of connection.
Yeah, and then so it happened after the whole big story arc, but they ended up proposing and gonna get married and all that stuff. So I thought it was really cool, kind of resurgence of that character. Like, oh, remember her? She's going to play a big part in Batwoman's story. And then they end up in a relationship.
I feel so dumb that I didn't make that connection.
No, I love the transfer aspect of it because it's like the real life of cops, the NYPD blue kind of thing underneath all this kind of stuff. Same thing, like another popular thing happens where cops retire and become detectives. And that's where Misty Knight comes in.
Yes,
that's true.
My girl Misty.
Yeah,
I love her aesthetically too.
Me too.
She looks so badass.
Yeah, it's like she's a sassy, unfortunately, like kind of almost out of blaxploitation film sort of character. But let's give her a robot arm. How cool is that? Yeah. I guess so she can like break walnuts or something.
How did you like her in Luke Cage?
I really enjoyed Misty Knight in the...
She's the shit in Luke Cage.
I'm fingers crossed that, the shows aren't dead and then I'll continue to see her. Or maybe do The Daughters of the Dragons with Colleen. I think that would be awesome too.
Ooh, that would be cool.
That would be cool.
I really love her. She was great. And I was waiting for her to lose her arm the whole time. So, oh my God. Oh, I was cringing every time she was in a fight scene because I was like, no, is it now?
That's really funny. Like, I want her to get her arm, but I don't want to see it.
Yeah, exactly.
When is it happening?
and a lot of times these characters, like, sort of like our supporting character episode, where they kind of like are important to the plot and move the plot.
Well, they definitely drive the plot, depending on which character it is. And a lot of the cops are like street level character, supporting characters.
That's true.
So like Batman, Spider-Man. You mentioned Maggie Sawyer with, Superman, but that's only when he's like, oh, I saved the day. And she's like, thanks, Superman. That kind of thing. But it's always like the street level ones, which I think is interesting.
I just like, thanks, Superman. I'm going to fill out these parking tickets now. Thanks for stopping that media.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, it would make sense though, anyway, because they're the ones that are literally on the streets with them.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And they fill out the life. And this is like, since we're talking about supporting character, also want to mention Gwen Stacy's dad, Captain George Stacy, played by Dennis Leary in the movies, who is a joke thief. That's not important. Anyway, sorry. Maybe that's not true. I don't know. But anyway, that's kind of cool too, because it shows that the cops aren't always like the Jim Gordon type in terms of being cool with the bad. Sometimes they're straight up antagonistic. Mm-hmm. And Captain Stacy's straight up like, Spider-Man is bad. Gotta get out of here, stupid, or whatever. I can't quote it, but you understand. He just thought it was dangerous or whatever. And also, it's very sad, but when he died, spoiler alert, it was a kind of big doubling down on the Ben dying. Uncle Ben.
Yeah.
Kind of like,
Is that just because he's old?
well, it's really, in a sense, but it's really, but it's because it gave Peter guilt.
Yeah.
And that's what the Parkers of the world run on.
Because
is guilt.
Isn't the panel like something like, oh, she loves you very much or something like that? Yeah.
Well, it's sad too, because also Gwen dies.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Did you just...
No, I did not forget about it, but it's like just putting it together.
Yeah.
Like, oh, your father died. Oh,
Yeah.
and then you die. It's
Yeah.
like,
I like Captain Stacy because he can be like you still have a soft spot for him, I guess, even if it's just because he's Gwen's father. But I mean, again, I feel realistically not everyone, especially if you're in law enforcement, can be super chill with superheroes and taking the law into their own hands. And...
Also, it's more like I see that kind of relationship as like it's like his father-in-law kind of like ragging on him the whole time.
Yeah.
So like he has to be like the big macho dad, like it's afraid to meet him type of thing.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
And if you think about it, I think that these kind of cop characters, they end up exaggerating in a good way the amazingness of the heroes because they bring in a very conventional perspective into the superhero narrative. So it's like, we're reading it. We're very used to the cape dude who's punching through a granite wall. And that's part of the narrative. But you enter in a cop who's like, who's going to clean up all these walls or whatever?
Well,
There's
also,
bricks everywhere.
They're in charge of keeping order. So they're probably, at least if I was a cop, I'd imagine, afraid that this is giving other people ideas
absolutely.
on either side to continue to do this type of behavior.
Yeah, well, we're glad you stopped him, but why'd you have to rip his arm out of his socket, Superman, or whatever? Yeah, no, you're right. It's a very kind of out of control thing, the vigilante or whatever.
Yeah.
So that's the supporting stuff. That's the characters that are primarily cops and are supportive and everything like that. But then there's oh, go ahead. Sorry, I don't want to cut you off. Oh, you open your mouth.
I was yawning.
How dare you? No, sorry. Well, anyway, and then there are the characters that are, I think, primarily cops. Like it was funny because like they're characters that are their superhero persona is a cop.
Oh,
How fucked up is that?
It's
like
rare, but it happens.
they hate the vigilantes, but it's like, oh, he's a cop and a superhero.
Yes.
That's fine as long as you went through the police academy.
Yeah.
You're great.
I mean, these are rare but worth mentioning. So, are you guys? I mean, I'm not overly familiar. I've read like sort of first 12 or 13 issues. Do you guys know Savage Dragon?
I know of him.
So he
looks ridiculous.
No. So here's the story, and this is what's great. Very short. Eric Larson, the guy that writes and draws Savage Dragon, and for a long time, by the way, I think it was the longest single running comic book by the same artist.
Nice.
And by the same creative team.
Could he just not draw anything else?
No, I just think he
kidding.
became.
Jeez.
So he
Arrest me.
Well, he did a lot of work on Spider-Man and stuff, but when Image happened, it was like creator-owned stuff. So he just kind of stayed there and did it for a long time. But he created him in elementary school.
Aww.
He came up with the character.
That's
cute. That makes sense. Like
It-
every little boy, like a
Yeah.
long time ago, was like, "I'm going to be a cop."
Yeah.
What if this cop was also like a dragon?
Yeah. I mean, he very much, it's like the Hulk with a fin on his head, basically. But it feels very more 9 to 5 Hellboy, the reading of that. Because it's, Savage Dragon's a big, strong dude, big, green, strong dude, who was mysteriously found in a cornfield covered in fire or whatever.
Oh.
Yeah.
I see.
Yeah, so they didn't really know where he came from. He was adopted. I'm sure there's Savage Dragon fans, the 7 of them or whatever, that are listening, will probably know a more in-depth history. But either way, and he's just got a 9 to 5 job as a cop. But it feels very Hellboy in that respect. He's
Looking
just
like that.
Yeah, he wears
super cool.
he wears the blue uniform underneath, and it's very much the sort of, if you've read Invincible, it has a similar feel to that. It's like there's superhero crime now. We're gonna, and so he joins on that basis and fights the superpowers.
What is about that? Like, whenever a superhero becomes a superhero,
Mm-hmm.
then villains just come out of the woodworks. It's like, oh, now I can put that costume on while I rob this bank.
Hey,
It's true.
didn't
It's a thing.
Vision have this same speech in one of the Avengers movies?
Yes, like the more we're about, I think it's kind of incoherent, but in the there more of us there are, the more like disasters there have been, and statistically, like we invite that power. or whatever. It's also the plot of Iron Man 2, I think, in a sense.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
There's also Dick Tracy, which
Oh yeah,
he's great.
Say that a little bit more convincingly.
it is funny that Dick Tracy basically just fought people with like dermatological issues. That was
I mean,
pimple face. I'm gonna get you.
did you ever see the movie with
Yeah,
with
Warren
Madonna?
Beatty. Yeah. Yeah.
It was
That's good.
interesting. It was good.
Yeah, Pacino plays Big Boy Capri. He just
Yeah.
plays Pacino to the third power. He's great.
I always liked the way he looked. Only because him in his yellow trench coat was just so out there from detectives, because it's usually brown or black.
The primary colors of newspaper.
Well, I just think it's funny. He's like, oh, I'm going to be a superhero. I got to change my suit to yellow because that's exaggerating the colors, and that makes me a superhero.
I don't know. I get the sense he was just walking around that way because it's at the time of the zoot suit and stuff like that. It's just like, but no. So Savage Dragon, the idea was like a cop who's going to respond to supervillains. I wanted to mention this earlier. Another underused sort of thing was that in Marvel, there's this thing called Code Blue. Tom DeFalco is the writer that kind of would put them in everything, and they were NYPD's cops that were specifically sort of tasked with dealing with super-powered villains, super-powered criminals. I guess.
Have to make the attempt, I suppose.
It's a really underused trope because I feel like that is what people would do. There's SWAT teams for any time there's like a drug offense or something like that. If there's supervillains everywhere, you're going to have cops with big plasma rifles.
Yeah, I think in the Flash CW show, they came out with like a meta task force kind of people, which makes sense. I guess.
It makes perfect sense.
But it's just funny that they had these like really overly skilled cops. Just what were you doing before this?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, like, you know, it's funny how they do that.
But Code Blue had it was like 5 different characters, and they all had their own personalities. It was basically like inserting a kind of cop drama inside of the world of super heroes. But it's cool because it made like a lot of logic inherent to it. I like that. But there's also we got superheroes who are also cops.
Oh,
I know who you're going to.
You can't stop talking about this.
I love him so much. You know what I'm going to say?
Yeah, I do.
Who is it?
Probably Judge Dredd.
Dredd. How do you not? Oh, I love him so much.
Why?
I'm kind of getting into him now. Oh, I'm glad you asked.
No, what did you do?
So, I mean,
if you couldn't tell, this is like Jered's bread and butter episode, I guess.
Yeah. Well, and I didn't know that because when we came up with the idea for the episode, I really kind of wasn't sure what we talk about or how it would go. And the more sort of research was thinking about it, I was like, oh, this is a cool character.
Add him.
Yeah, Kayla and I were like, oh, this one, and Jim Gordon.
Yeah.
No, I mean, you got to do Jim Gordon. He's but so the way Judge Dredd works is it's a post-apocalyptic future, and crime is so violent and out of control that the judges are these cops, and the whole trope of the judge, jury, and executioner. So it's cops, the lawmen that drive around on badass motorcycles and are allowed to just execute criminals and stuff like that. Now, okay, sorry.
But you don't like Dexter?
Well, this is what I was going to say.
Out of context.
So here's what's super interesting about, I also don't like Dexter, I guess, too, for some backup. But here's what's interesting about Dredd is that on his face, he's just the most relentless, stop at nothing to punish evil and do the kind of quote unquote right things. Absolutely brutal ultra violence.
He's like a better RoboCop.
Absolutely. He's
more fun.
He's more mentally that way. Like, so he's a normal dude, but absolutely. He's robotic and he'll stop at nothing. But on the other end, the comic book is a parody of fascism. Mm-hmm. So there's a way where you're sort of like exaggerating exactly how bad this mentality would be. And reading Judge Dredd comic books a lot of times is like trying to figure that out about like, is this a good guy or a bad guy? So as fun as it is to watch him punch through people's heads or whatever and say the coolest like lines before he offs people, there's also a sort of feeling of like,
you have to say something.
What's that?
Say some of the lines that he says.
There's a line where he's like, gaze into the fist of Dredd, which is fantastic.
I hate it.
That's borderline philosophical.
It's just he like says whatever he's about to do with dread at the end of it. And it's like, oh, come on, man.
Absolutely.
I don't know. I think in terms of these types of characters, like the anti-heroes that have no qualms about killing people that they themselves view like bad, I think he's really well executed, and I think he has some really good adaptions, and I think he is super interesting. So
he like I said takes this sort of like the concept of like the Dirty Harry, and they drive it to its almost ultimate ridiculous conclusion. And like I said, most of the comics have this weird politics in the background, making it seem like the judges are not great people.
Well, and I think that's probably the most interesting aspect of it. It's not just like, this person gets to go out and kill bad guys. It's like, oh no, there's some heavy philosophy up in here.
Yeah. No,
I do like the concept of them taking out all the men after it. It's like, oh, you're going to go out and you're going to like execute them if they deserve to be executed.
Yeah,
like, you're just going to carry out the entire sentence.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's too much power for one
judge.
Man.
Yeah.
Interesting societal commentary.
Mm-hmm. So the next one I'm super excited about, The Police by Day.
Oh, yeah.
Because
Jered added this category just for us.
I think so.
Yeah. Oh yeah, Kayla too. Yeah. So there's two that I'm really excited about, and of course there's Barry Allen. He's a CSI. Of course he's a cop during the day, which is really funny because I love that whole aspect of him because he's always late. He always gets in arguments with his higher ups and everything. But I think people forget that he's a detective.
Yeah.
He is one of the top detectives as far as the Justice League goes, which I was finally happy that in Rebirth, whenever the whole button story happened and Batman finds this button and he's like, oh, I need to figure this out. I can't figure this out. Who do I call? The Flash. Like, I mean,
and he's a better detective than Batman in certain regards. That's what's
when it comes to like blood work,
forensics, yeah,
forensics,
because like Batman is the kind of, he does all the shit, but he's the kind of detective that you associate with like looking for clues and interviewing people and following leads, whereas Barry looks at a thing.
Well, he's a scientist too, so he's so smart.
They're so ahead of their time on it, right? Yeah. Because CSI wasn't even popular. Mm-hmm. No. But they were like, okay, maybe it was a happy accident. They're like, we'll make him a forensics guy, because then he's half cop, half detective.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you could tell they didn't know what forensics were, like way in the begining, because Garrett got his powers from hard water molecules.
Oh,
whatever
yeah.
the fuck that means.
Yeah. No, I think you're not just wrong, or you're not just right about comic books. I think you're right about the police, like that they didn't know what science was back then. There's a great John Mulaney joke where he talks about like before DNA evidence, they would be like, "Oh, Bob, there's a bunch of blood. It's the victim's blood." It's like, "Oh, okay, gross." Like, there's no, yeah.
There's another really interesting character, and I like this character a lot, and I like her transition. So Renee Montoya,
yes,
absolutely,
always in the comics. She's always been throughout it.
I think she's in the Telltale game too.
Yes, she is. But she's the Question now, which I thought was such a cool character development, because you think sometimes, especially with these cop characters that don't play much, whenever this hero's story gets so big, what is a cop character, how is it going to fit in there, like Bullock and stuff like that? I don't think I've seen Bullock in forever in the comics.
He just pops up from time to time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But with Renee, to keep her in, I believe they kind of gave her something else to do. So do you know how she became the Question?
Did it happen during the 52 sort of thing when that was going on?
Yeah. So like after Crisis and everything like that. But so he paid her to go watch this abandoned house. So it was this really funny thing, like he turned the bat signal into a question mark and pointed it right at her apartment building.
That's great.
And so she like closes the blinds and is like, whatever. And then after she has a one night stand, she like wakes up in the middle of the night and he's in her bedroom. It's terrifying.
Are you talking about the original Question was in there? Yeah, Vic.
Yeah. And he like essentially pays her like expenses and everything. I think it's like $200 a day or something like that to go watch this building. And she watches it for 2 weeks and then sees this like creature go into the building. And then the rest is history. He ends up dying. And then I think he asks her like, what will you become? She becomes a Question.
It's super cool.
Such a cool looking character too. If you've look them up if you haven't, because it's such a little time capsule of like this noir sort of thing. Sort of this, it's a blue suit with a blue fedora, and so this is where Rorschach really comes from.
I was gonna bring up Rorschach
too. The faceless mask, the mask that like it looks like pantyhose or whatever, but it's a very cool, very creepy kind of look.
I love the aesthetic.
Also, something to say about Renee Montoya, which is kind of cool. A lot of these characters who are sort of cops in their alter egos and then become superheroes, that's sort of there from the beginning, where she was a supporting character for actually, I almost forgot. She's the other side of the Harley coin. She was created by the animated series.
Yeah, that's right.
And she was really beloved because she was just a good like offset to Harvey Bullock. He's an asshole. She's an
I
idealistic
always
sort of person.
loved their kind of back and
Great.
forth. It was always great.
So she comes in. She's a supporting character for a long time, and then she graduates to badass. Super.
Yeah, she works alongside the Birds of Prey, Batwoman a lot, mostly Batwoman. But she's a really cool character, and I think she looks really cool as the Question.
There's also another
It's my turn.
character who.
So, my beloved Dick Grayson also goes in and out sometimes of being a daytime cop. He originally became a cop when he moved to Bloodhaven after he left Bruce. And
the falling out.
Yeah, after the falling out. And took over Bloodhaven as like his city that he protected as Nightwing. He also joined the police force. And so a lot of the times it'll be him in the day going like, oh, I'm trying to get these bad guys. And then they are limited by, like, I guess, obviously restricted by the law. So he would take his Nightwing training and be like, okay, well, at night, I'm going to continue to follow this lead, but as Nightwing. When do they sleep?
Yeah. They just micro naps.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It would literally be a continuation of a case from him in uniform to him as Nightwing, and I'm just like, you're so exhausted. Probably.
Just take a nap.
Yeah.
He sleeps like a dolphin, where just half of his brain shuts down.
That's the cop half.
Yeah.
And the Nightwing half comes alive.
But I mean, I think it says something about these characters that choose to continue to try to, like, take down bad guys in their day job as well. There's no reprieve for them. And also that's just like their mentality. That's their driving force, is like, I want to be a force for good. I want to continue to fight the good fight, even in my day job.
Yeah. And I think a lot of times it makes sense too, because it's like especially if they started out with cops, or, you know, they like keep butting up against like the problem of like, how do we fight these unconventional forces. They're like, well, I'll get a costume. In Watchmen, actually, the original Night Owl, if you remember, that was a cop, and he talks about like the whole reason they started doing it was the gangs would dress up and like kind of more outlandish garb, and it's like, well, if they're gonna dress up, we said we dress up too.
I always loved that from Watchmen, because it's kind of like the reverse of what comics are now. So the hero comes out and then the villains come out. But that one, it's like, these people are dressing up weird. We should do it too.
That's
like,
true. That looks like fun, and I like punching people in the face. I'll tell you what. Okay.
Yeah. I always thought Dick Grayson's kind of history and transition into that was really interesting, because after the falling out, and obviously he's kind of discovering himself again, it only makes sense that
he would go
do that.
Yeah.
It was from a writerly standpoint, super smart way of just distinguishing him in an adult way away from Batman. It's like he's like his own thing, and cops, you take them seriously whether you like them or not. So it's like, it's not just he's a boy wonder who's like, I guess, bigger now. So it's like, oh, he's got a legit job. He's like, you know, fingering perps. That sounds dirty now that I say it. But that's
What?
You never heard that expression? Fingering
not
perps. Yeah.
No way.
Yeah, it is.
Oh,
it really
God.
is. Now,
Wait,
any
does
perps
that
that are
mean,
listening
like-
have been fingered, and they know.
Does that mean like pointing to
I
them?
don't actually think, I don't know what it means. I think maybe it means like getting the bad guys. Like, well, you're a bad guy, pointing at you with my finger. I don't know.
All right. Well, since this conversation has gone way too far, let's go really far.
Wait, well, before we do, just want to mention one thing. I got to mention Witchblade. I'm not even a big fan, but I think she deserves a mention, because she's a hard-nosed cop and it's that story where a hard-nosed cop gets a crazy weapon from the stars and then becomes a superhero. If you don't know, Witchblade was really popular in the 90s. Very Wizard magazine loved it.
I always saw her.
Yeah.
And never read her.
Yeah, it's because that's how they were almost meant to be, right? The 90s comics, they were just like really cool images. And just not necessarily the best
like the Spawn
stories.
comics.
Yeah. But people did follow and I think very similar to that.
Yeah.
But, you know, she's a hard-nosed New York cop, and she gets this weapon, and it gives her like, it's sort of like, I guess, Hela's power from Thor Ragnarok, you know, where she can make blades and different stuff like that.
Oh my God.
Yeah. But it was worth a look, or at least a mention. Moving on.
Well, funny you should say space weapons.
Oh.
We can't forget the intergalactic space people.
Yes.
So we've talked about Green Lanterns quite a bit, and we can't not mention cops without the space cops.
Ultimate space cops.
It's really easy to forget that that's what they are to them.
Yeah.
To us, they're superheroes. Anytime the Green Lanterns come in, they're superheroes. But their job is a beat cop.
They're literally assigned like precincts in space.
Exactly. That's what I was gonna say. Like you know they're a cop, and you're reminded of it when you read a Green Lantern comic because they're like Sector 2497.
Oh, well, that's your sector.
Therefore, Sinestro is a dirty cop. That's the story of a dirty cop.
Dun.
Yeah.
Turn yellow.
I was thinking about the fact that like they have an oath, and Brightest Day and Blackest Night, yada yada. Mm-hmm. But they don't have Miranda rights. They should have that.
Oh man!
Like you have the right to be trapped in a giant green bubble. If you refuse this right, we'll hit you with an anvil.
Yeah, I think their right is just the ring and costume.
That too. Yeah,
like if you know they're coming, then it's like fucked up. Yeah. Also, it's space. Why would they have Miranda's not in space? They know.
You understand Miranda's not a person, right? Like,
yes.
Miranda just lives here. She's not in space. Sorry.
All right. One way, I don't know how people can forget that the Green Lanterns are basically essentially space cops because their stories really function like that, like kind of a political drama, cop drama. It kind of reminds me of Star Wars, like the Jedi, where they're like hunting down criminals on foreign planets.
Oh yeah.
They have fellow people on the street level. They have people they have to answer to, like the captain. So
right now, as we spake, there is a Grant Morrison Green Lantern title that is just overtly cop-like. Just completely
I love that he went back to that.
Yeah, it's really good.
Because you really get to see, because I think what the Green Lantern series kind of went away from, you have all of the main Green Lantern characters are the aliens like Kilowog and all of them, but he's really going hard into the alien part, which makes sense because the Green Lanterns...
Again, like Star Wars.
Yeah. But like you get to see a lot of them. Like one of my current favorites is Volk. He's a big guy with a volcano for a head, and he's amazing.
Oh my god, what?
And he's like, don't make me angry, I'll erupt.
You won't like me when I'm angry.
Hey, you want somebody to be like, yeah, we get it, you're a volcano, we get it. But it is true, it's like those are the two elements that he's like distilled the whole series down to. Super weird aliens and cop drama. Mm-hmm. And yeah, it's really cool. And then there's other like intergalactic forces, like that. I was to say, we talked about this earlier, but the Nova Corps is sort of Marvel's version. And I don't want to, I love Nova. I love that character. I do think the Nova Corps is a bit derivative of the Green Lantern Corps. Not just because.
Right, because they're both cops in space.
It's called Corps.
Yeah.
Well, I think what happens, rather than it being purely derivative, I think what happens is like if you're the Marvel guys and you're writing stories, you realize, a lot of stories, it would just make more sense if there was a intergalactic force in this universe. You know what I mean? So it's like, even though the DC got there first, it just like, it's kind of hard to have that vacuum in the Marvel universe or something like that. They've actually had a few people, like the Shi'ar Imperial Guard kind of works like a police force too, a little bit, but the Nova Corps is kind of...
I'd see them more as like an army type thing.
They do, well, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because I was going to say that's, in this episode, something when we're narrowing it down, we haven't talked about S.H.I.E.L.D. and Nick Fury
or
very
like
much.
Amanda Waller.
Exactly, because you kind of had, it's like, yeah, they do policing, but for the most part, it's more of like an intelligence agency or a paramilitary group.
Yeah, that's a whole nother type of thing, like the government agency type thing. I mean, yeah.
And then in similar, like, it's like if you're an intergalactic force and it's like, what's your jurisdiction? If it's outside of your jurisdiction, then you're an army. Yeah. And if it's inside, then you're the police. So it's kind of a weird thing. And your leader's got a mohawk and he thinks he's Superman, but he's really cool.
Oh, shout out
shout out to Gladiator. Anyway,
I love Gladiator. Yes. He's so cool.
There was also, I don't know if this was mostly 90s. Do you guys remember the Dark Stars?
I know the name.
No.
So it was just a kind of like alternate Green Lantern group and I think the way that the story worked, because it's a bit, I only read it peripherally, was that for a while the Green Lanterns were absent, and these Dark Stars, they basically had like super powerful suits, almost like Iron Man in space, sort of energy powers or whatever. They were like a kind of placeholder or whatever, and they were like cooler, like they were meaner.
They are called the
Dark Stars. Yeah,
they would say, "Damn,
I hate you!" Like, take this,
scandalous.
Take this, volcano-headed son of a bitch. They'd say.
So they're more the noir cops.
Yeah, very much. And and they've also been kind of bad guys for the Green Lanterns a lot. Yeah. And then we get on to our next section, which I think is like actually the most fun.
Is this the Forgotten?
This is the ones that it's like we didn't really forget, but it's easy to not think about.
Yeah, to associate them with law enforcement.
They were a long time ago, and they're so disconnected from that past that you don't think about. But there is one that you mentioned, but with the newest iteration, it went right back into it.
Yes.
Which is Martian Manhunter.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because when he came to Earth, he's like, oh, I'm going to be a cop.
Yeah.
Why not? He did go away from being a cop for a long time.
Yeah, because there was no Martians to cop.
Yeah. Well, in the current one with Steve Orlando, he's an Earth cop.
Yeah.
Like strictly. And nobody knows that he's Martian Manhunter. So
that's true.
It's only 2 issues in, so I don't really know how far that's going to go. His partner just found out he's an alien because he started melting from
Only
fire.
2 issues in, though.
Yeah.
He's not very good at hiding that.
Well, he started melting from fire after he got into a car accident. His partner's in the passenger seat, and she's like, what is going on?
You're not supposed to melt from fire that way. You're supposed to melt from fire like a normal person. I can't help but commend that series. That is so good.
Yeah.
By the way, I mean,
the new one?
Yeah, so good.
Yeah.
Art.
Really good.
Do you remember who the artist is?
I
don't either. But it's really good, and I'm sure we'll check in on it later. But yeah, it goes back and forth between. He used to be a cop on Mars, a badass super cop on Mars, and his day job now is just walking around being a detective.
I think it makes sense for his character.
Yeah.
And he knows it.
Yeah.
I mean, he knows kind of the laws there kind of emulate the laws on Earth. So, I mean, he's already had the training.
Technically.
If you're a cop, if you're a criminal, you really don't want to get the attention of Martian Manhunter. It's like, oh, I got to get away from this cop. I'll just duck behind his dumpster. It's like, oh, he turned into a dragon. Fuck.
Yep. And then I know one Kayla.
Really yeah. It's because I can't believe that you guys forgot about Rick Grimes.
Yeah.
I mean, the sheriff hat is iconic.
The apocalypse kind of made me forget.
No, but I just feel like as for him and Shane, I feel like it's a really important part of their characters' mentalities towards the beginning half. Not even half, but the first couple issues of The Walking Dead.
Yeah. Why he makes sense, or why either one of them made sense as a kind of like group leader.
Yeah.
You know, taking authority.
Well, especially in the beginning, because before all the craziness happened and the governor and all of them, they knew he was a cop, so they kind of just naturally followed him because they're like, oh, he can protect us. He knows what to do.
I mean, like, not only that is he has the technical training with the guns. He trains them how to shoot, how to defend themselves. So like his job as a cop is kind of vital to the group survival. Yeah. Going forward.
Yeah, no question.
And I knew it was a risk bringing up Rick Grimes because Noah freaking hates him for no reason.
There's a reason.
No, there's not a good reason. I hate Rick Grimes.
When we have
all the bad decisions he's made.
I wanted to pick this fight while we were recording so that people would come out of the woodwork to support me. So don't let me down, guys.
We know everybody loves you.
Rick Grimes is such a good character. He tries his hardest.
Okay, so I agree.
I'm in the middle here, by the way. No, I'm just gonna say I'm pro Rick.
Yes.
So it's true. We've talked about this before. I think he's a good dude. I think he's a good dude.
Fine.
No, hold on. You're not liking Rick doesn't come out of nowhere.
Yeah, I mean, I've read the entire series. Yeah. I've gotten a lot of Rick.
Yeah. And he's messed up before.
Shane is right there.
I don't like Shane either. He's awful.
Oh yeah, I'm glad we cleared that up because if you hated Rick but were pro Shane, I think we'd have bomb threats or something like that.
Okay, this is going into a weird tangent of Walking Dead, but in the TV show, there was definitely moments where I started siding with Shane only because he was very pragmatic in his decisions. He was crazy and he was bad, but he did have the intentions of sleeping with every woman in the camp.
Very pragmatic.
Survival.
We've got to populate the earth.
Whatever. That's fine.
I think Shane kind of represents, going back, to comics and cops. Shane kind of represents kind of like that hard ass cop on the pages. And Rick kind of is more of the gray where you can work outside of the lines. He's not limited, but.
Well, the thing too is that in the comic book, obviously Shane's way less represented. He gets nixed really early, and I think in some sense it also represents losing your head. Like Shane kind of dials up to 11 super quickly.
Yeah.
Because the stakes are so high that like rather than keep his head cool, like the show character is very different. He's basically the Punisher. He ended up being the Punisher.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. What's that guy's name again?
John Bernthal.
So good.
He is good.
Yeah. But anyway, yeah.
I mean, thank God they didn't get like a really dirty cop as like Rick. I mean, just imagine like, oh, he's a cop. He can help us, and he's just like the governor.
Yeah.
Like, he's
It's like, I'll just revert to my cop training. Give me your drugs.
Yep. And then we can't forget Bishop.
Oh yeah, that's interesting too. I mean, because he's
We did forget Bishop. I mean, most people forget he was a cop.
Because that's part of that's why he's badass. That's his training. But the reason people easily forget it is by the time. So if you were familiar with him at all, Bishop, and his origins and stuff. So there's this character, Trevor Fitzroy. I think that's his first name. They usually call him Fitzroy, and he's like his mutant ability is to time travel, but he's a murderer and an asshole.
Oh man!
And so he comes to our present time, followed by 3 cops.
Nice.
And one of them's Bishop.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
So, but then obviously Bishop eventually and goes back and forth, but kind of gets stuck here and is just like an X-Men. Yeah. So we forget that like the reason he's like just a badass is he's a future cop.
The reason he's even here is because he was a cop.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Way out of his jurisdiction.
Yeah. Absolutely. His chronal jurisdiction. And then the characters that we are super easy to forget too. And it's because they've had just been all over the place in terms of like their concept, which is not great, but
really not been front and center for a while.
Yeah. The Hawkins, the Hawk people.
The Hawk people.
Are you talking about Hawkman and Hawkgirl?
That's them.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would have gone with Hawk people too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it is really interesting and kind of hard to forget because their story is about reincarnation.
Yeah.
So depending on what they reincarnated as, it's hard to forget that they were that.
Okay, well, with DC too, there's just different times where they've not been committed to resolving it, and they're just like, they were never those people. They're just space cops from Thanagar. Mm-hmm. There's a whole period, I guess, in the late '80s, early '90s, where they were they're from a different planet, and the animated series, the Justice League animated series with Hawkgirl, where she really was awesome and prominent. They just play her like a straight up cop. Mm-hmm. It was really cool.
Yeah. I mean, I do. Have you read you've read the new Hawkman series?
It's really good.
It is really good. And I like how they started to kind of make sense.
Bring it all back together.
Yeah. They're like, oh no, he dies and reincarnates. He's been doing this forever. That's what he's meant to do. And yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah, like this is a nice way to tie it in.
Yeah.
And what badass looking cops, by the way. That's just really intimidating.
That is really cool.
Even when they didn't have the mace, it's just like this huge regalia with like plasma guns and like huge knives and stuff like that.
This is actually news to me. I didn't know they functioned as cops.
Yeah.
So
they had a whole entire police force and everything.
What?
Yeah. So they came to Earth, again, searching for of a convict, or something like that. And then they get here, and I don't know enough about the intricacies of the story, but they get, for whatever reason, entrapped within Earther politics. And then, again, from our context, seem like superheroes or something like that.
That's cool.
And their story has changed so much since then, because now, currently, he's an archaeologist, or was. He's figuring out his past because he's getting memories of when he was, back in Egypt and as space cop and on this other planet and as a Kryptonian and all this stuff. Yeah, it's all over the place, but it's making sense of it.
Yeah, and because I think they have such a cool image and idea, but the history's been so mixed up. So it's just like, okay, they're hawk-looking badasses, and that's the story. And they're
trying to fix it.
Yeah.
I can honestly say I've never been interested in picking up anything from the Hawk people.
Yeah.
And now I kind of am.
You should, yeah. Brian Hitch is great.
Yeah, they started doing Rebirth, so I think it's only 8 or 9 issues.
I can catch up. That's not too much.
You can do it. But another cool one is the Spectre. A lot of people forget that one because, I don't know, he's overpowered and insane.
Yeah.
It's the anger of God.
Yeah, he sunk San Diego. That when we talk about Aquaman, Sub Diego was because of him.
Sub Diego. I love it.
But yeah, I mean, a lot of people forget that he was a cop too.
Spectre looks cool too.
Before he became the
Sub
Spirit.
Diego sounds like a Cuban sandwich. Just saying.
Why?
I don't know. classic. There's also the Spirit, who I don't think most people know now.
Oh, yeah.
Which is a really early character. And what was funny about him is that I had to look this up, but the first few issues, apparently, he's a cop and he becomes the Spirit. And then back then they were so cared so much about just up to the minute monthly sales that he has the mask, he's kind of a superhero, and they drop the cop thing entirely.
Oh no!
So he's just like, I don't care. They like him better in the mask.
I love the aesthetic of the Spirit, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, they made a movie.
Yeah,
not too long ago.
If you want to call it a movie.
Yeah, sure. I was gonna say they try to do like the Sin City type looking aspect of it.
It was Frank Miller's first shot at directing, and lo and behold, he does know how to do that.
Again,
and so
aesthetic
he did.
Is cool.
Exactly. Yeah, the aesthetic
it looks
is cool.
Awesome, but it also he didn't come up with it.
What?
He just copied Robert Rodriguez's Sin City. Yeah.
Well, I mean, technically, he was doing Sin City like the comics.
Yes.
So, I mean,
yeah.
Yes, he did steal his style, but that was the style of the comics. I don't know why he would try to do Spirit that way, though. I mean, Spirit should have been more like Dick Tracy. To me personally, but I mean,
I think Frank Miller might be a kind of a crazy person, and he thought that they had launched an entire genre of movie.
Just black and white with
yeah. And it turns out no.
All right, and I guess to wrap it up, we did try to find villain cops, even though cops in real life are not that great and pretty villainous.
Oftentimes, yes.
Oftentimes, but in comics, it was really hard to find villain cops, like
straight up villains.
Yeah, that either were cops and then became villains, or are cops and are villains. I couldn't remember. I know there was one for Black Lightning. I'm pretty sure. Can't remember his name. I came ill prepared for this part.
Well, there's a character that I liked called Lockup, who's a relatively obscure Batman villain, but it's one of my favorite episodes of the animated series, which is where I found out about him. Which is just some dude, some prison guard at Arkham that was a piece of crap and torturing all, like, behind bars, all Batman's villains. And then when he gets fired or found out, I think, by Bruce Wayne, he's like, well, I'm going to be a villain too. Because he had the power of villainy, but not irony. Yeah.
Both is important in Batman universe.
Yes. but it's true. We look, I mean, there's Sheriff Root, you'll know from the Preacher comics. And then there's a few scattered through Sin City, like Jack Rafferty. But
and then we already mentioned Shane.
Yep.
Like, I mean, it's so weird to think of him as a villain. He is definitely for like the protagonist, but it's like it's an apocalyptic world.
Yeah.
There's no law anymore.
Well, and that's I mean, especially in superhero stories, you would think that there would be more cops on the page that would act a lot more antagonistic than they do.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's a reason. And it's because of the Comics Code. The Comics Code stated for a long time that you couldn't have appropriate authority, legitimate authority figures like cops couldn't be made villains. So
I did not know this.
Yeah, it's true. It's the same thing for why vampires had to be like the living vampire.
Vampires
they couldn't
are cool.
be good. Yeah, exactly. So a big history of comic books has sort of made it impossible to kind of just straight up villainize the police. That's changing now in more ways. And we have to be cognizant of the fact that we're three white people talking about the police and the way we're talking about. We've had experiences with the police, maybe negative, maybe positive, but in other communities that our opinions of the police would probably be tempered by that.
Yeah,
and this episode would be more like, hey, fuck these pieces of shit. Or what have you.
I do want to say that is interesting. I didn't know that was part of that, which now makes sense. That way, when you try to look up villain cops, that there's like none.
There's some operating in the gray.
Yeah.
There's a lot that are on the good side.
One that I remember was, or just recently, was in the Arrow TV show. I know most people don't like this. but the entire police force is bad, and it's his team literally beating the shit out of all these cops because they get taken over by these big high up, I think they're called the Quadrant or something. It's this like global criminal organization or something like that. But it's this whole big thing. But yeah, the entire police force was bad. So it was kind of interesting to see that happen. And nobody did anything. It's just so weird. Like, when they make an entire police force bad, it's like, are you all just not doing anything because they're wearing these uniforms? Or like, where's the cavalry here? Like, yeah, it's interesting.
Indeed. Mm-hmm. So cops, guys.
Yeah, this was a really obscure episode, but I mean, they're an integral part of comics.
Absolutely. Been there from the beginning.
Literally.
They're going to continue to be in it.
The whole point of comics is to stop bad guys, and most of the time they're there to assist, sometimes hinder.
This is exciting. Also, if you're listening to this episode right now, you are legally deputized as a law officer.
Oh, don't
go arrest people.
Nope,
Do
that's not actually what happens, guys. No.
Don't listen to Kayla.
Listen to whoever you want.
It's 2 against 1. This is how this works.
Oh, okay.
You're cops now.
Have fun, guys. And I almost forgot comic book recommendations because I said, have fun, guys, and that was not the end.
It's crucial.
We're still here.
Yeah, surprise. All right, so for mine, it's going to be really quick. The question, I will recommend that Renee Montoya's first kind of introduction as the question. So it took place in 2006. It was in 52, not New 52, but it was the lead up to it. It happened in volume 1, number 4. So the way that series kind of was set up was it happened in weeks. Each volume was a week. So this one was week 4, and it takes place over 7 days. And in 7 days, the question dies, and Renee Montoya becomes the question. So It's really good. So it's by Jeff Johns, Grant Morrison, all these big people.
Who are these people? I've never...
The big names.
Yeah, you would say that. And Greg Rucka, too. I mean, it's a lot of big names. Kayla.
Yes. I want to do Misty, even though she's kind of cop. But she's like the epitome of like the lawful good character that I love.
Mm-hmm.
And so for Misty, I want to do Daughters of the Dragons. Oh, it's her and Colleen. Kind of in a high, like it's kind of like a Heroes for Hire, but for women, which is
That's
awesome.
cool.
And so they recently, in November of last year, did a digital only comic book about Daughters of the Dragon. So you can find it online. It was written by Jed McKay and penciled by Travel Foreman, and it's really, really good.
Yeah, no excuses not to read it. It's online, guys.
Google is your friend.
It's inside of your computer.
Or the thing you're probably listening to us on. So,
The Pahone.
Guess what character I'm recommending?
Judge Dredd.
You goddamn right.
I was hoping it wasn't Judge Dredd.
It's Judge Dredd, and it was really hard for me not to recommend the movie because that movie is so good. And
Wait, which
such
one?
I'm above the law. Not that one. Not that one.
I will say that's probably
Not a
your
bad one.
best impression.
Thank you. I'm going to keep it up.
No, please don't.
You should hear my Armando DeSante. Anyway, so he was the bad guy in Judge Dredd. Anyway,
Oh, I see.
But no, the one with Carl Urban is great. The Dredd, it's a fantastic. But that's not my recommendation because I feel like a lot of you already know about that. My recommendation is Judge Dredd Origins. Yes, it came out in 2006 and it went 2007. It's pretty long. It's a sort of retelling. It's a, what do you call it? Like a lot of flashbacks, and it explains the origin of the rise of the judges and everything like that. And it's written by John Wagner and Carlos Ezquerra. I think that's how you say his name. Ezquerra?
I wouldn't know.
Well, they're the original team that created the character.
Nice.
Carlos Ezquerra actually just recently died. Kind of sad, but
Aw.
yeah, but this is really, really good stuff.
I love a good origin story.
It's a good combination because it's sort of like it's more recent art, so your sensibilities will still appreciate it. While
my
at the
art
same
snobbery
time-
will be appeased.
Absolutely, but all of our listeners, like if you read comics now, it's kind of hard to kind of go back and read stuff from the 70s and 80s sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
So this came out recently, but it's also explaining the character, so it's a good intro.
Mm-hmm.
Very good.
Nice.
That's it, guys.
Till next time.
Oh, one last thing. I think there should be a character called the Long Arm of the Law, and he's like a cop, but he's
All
got
right,
stretchy characters.
Okay, bye.
Thanks for listening. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter at the Fantom Zone Pod for more podcast updates.
And if you didn't
Okay,
have the
Mr.
same-
Philosophy.
Yeah.
I can't do this.
You can't.
I haven't even finished my
You did.
first cup of coffee.
I'm not asking you to answer. Really, what I'm saying is that like,
Don't pose the question,
No, but-
rhetorical or not.
yeah, I'm saying. Well, it's not rhetorical. Well,
Why?
maybe it is.
Why is the why that why is
Who?
go?
What's his why?
Why is
Here's what-
good?
Here's what I'm saying: is that